Picture yourself in a royal bedchamber, the air thick with the smell of blood and sweat. You've just delivered your 16th child, but instead of celebration, there's only exhaustion and the terrible knowledge that in 18 months, you'll be back in this same bed, screaming through another labor. This was the reality for Europe's most fertile queens, women whose bodies became baby-making factories for entire dynasties, trapped in an endless cycle of conception, pregnancy, and birth that would make modern women faint with horror. Tonight, I'm taking you into the private chambers of 7 European queens who hold the shocking records for the most children ever born to royal women. These aren't just numbers on a page, these are stories of incredible human endurance, where wombs became weapons of political warfare, and motherhood was literally a matter of life and death for kingdoms. Before we dive into these extraordinary stories, I'd love your support. Please hit subscribe, give this video a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement helps me bring you more of these fascinating historical tales. Our journey begins in the opulent courts of 17th century Spain, where a Habsburg princess would redefine what it meant to be a royal breeding machine. Margarita Teresa of Spain was born in 1651 into the most inbred royal family in European history. But what she lacked in genetic diversity, she made up for in sheer reproductive determination. Married to her uncle, Holy Roman Emperor Leopold I, at just 15 years old, she immediately began what would become one of the most intensive baby-making careers in royal history. Over the next 12 years, Margarita Teresa would endure 15 pregnancies. That's more than one pregnancy every year of her adult life. Think about that for a moment. From age 15 to 27, this woman was almost constantly pregnant, giving birth, recovering just enough to conceive again, and starting the brutal cycle over. Her first pregnancy at 15 nearly killed her. Spanish court records describe a labor lasting 36 hours, with the teenage queen screaming so loudly that courtiers in distant wings of the palace could hear her agony. The baby, a daughter, survived only 3 weeks, a heartbreaking pattern that would define Margarita's life. What makes her story particularly tragic is the Habsburg family's desperate need for male heirs. The dynasty was literally dying out from centuries of inbreeding, and every pregnancy carried the weight of an empire's survival. Her second pregnancy produced another daughter, who died in infancy. Her third ended in stillbirth after she collapsed during a court ceremony. But she kept trying, kept hoping. Her fourth pregnancy finally produced a son, but he was born with severe disabilities and died before his first birthday. The court physicians, desperate to improve her chances, tried everything: exotic diets, bloodletting, even having her pray over holy relics during labor.
By her 10th pregnancy, Margarita's body was showing the strain. Contemporary portraits reveal a woman aged far beyond her years, hollow-eyed and gaunt from constant childbearing. Yet she'd delivered 5 more children, including 2 sons who would survive to adulthood and secure the Habsburg succession. Margarita Teresa died at 27 during her 15th labor, her exhausted body finally unable to endure another birth. She had spent nearly half her short life pregnant, sacrificing everything for a dynasty that would outlive her by centuries. From Habsburg Spain, we traveled to medieval England, where a French princess would become the ultimate royal baby factory. Philippa of Hainault married King Edward III of England in 1328 and immediately began what would become one of the most successful reproductive careers in English royal history. Over 25 years, she delivered 14 children who would reshape European politics for generations. What made Philippa extraordinary wasn't just the number of children, but the circumstances under which she bore them. Edward III was constantly at war, fighting Scotland, launching the 100 Years' War with France, dealing with rebellions at home. Philippa didn't retreat to safe castle chambers during these conflicts. Instead, she followed her husband on military campaigns, giving birth in army camps, temporary strongholds, and sometimes even in tents while battles raged nearby. Her most famous childbirth occurred during the Siege of Calais in 1347. While English forces surrounded the French fortress, Philippa went into labor with her 11th child in a military pavilion within sight of enemy walls. Medieval chroniclers describe her delivering Prince Thomas while cannons fired overhead and the screams of wounded soldiers echoed across the battlefield. But Philippa's reproductive success came with a terrible price. By her 13th pregnancy, she was suffering from what court physicians called womb sickness, likely a combination of infection, prolapse, and severe depression. She would sit for hours staring at nothing, occasionally weeping uncontrollably. Her 13th pregnancy nearly ended in disaster when she went into premature labor during a Christmas feast. The royal hall was cleared as Philippa delivered Princess Margaret on a makeshift bed of silk cushions, while guests waited anxiously in adjacent chambers. Philippa's final pregnancy at 41 produced Prince Thomas, but the delivery left her permanently disabled. She never walked properly again and died at 55, her body utterly worn out from a quarter century of almost constant pregnancy. Remarkably, 12 of her 14 children survived to adulthood, an extraordinary achievement for medieval times. Among them were the Black Prince, John of Gaunt, and several daughters who became queens of European kingdoms.
Now we journey to Renaissance France, where an Italian princess would use her womb as a political weapon. Catherine de Medici arrived in France in 1533 as a 14-year-old bride to the future King Henry II. For the first 10 years of marriage, she was mocked as the Italian shopkeeper's daughter who couldn't produce heirs. But when she finally began conceiving, she made up for lost time with a vengeance. Between 1544 and 1556, Catherine delivered 10 children in 12 years, an incredible pace that transformed her from court laughingstock to the most powerful woman in France. But each pregnancy was a carefully calculated political move in the dangerous world of French court politics. Her first pregnancy, after 10 years of humiliating infertility, was treated like a national celebration. When she delivered future King Francis II, the relief at court was so overwhelming that courtiers wept openly. But Catherine had learned a crucial lesson. In royal politics, pregnancy equals power. She used her subsequent pregnancies brilliantly, timing announcements to distract from military defeats, using confinement periods to negotiate secretly with foreign ambassadors, and even employing her children as diplomatic hostages in international negotiations. Catherine's sixth pregnancy occurred during a particularly brutal period of religious warfare in France. While Protestant and Catholic armies slaughtered each other across the countryside, she gave birth to future King Charles IX in a fortified castle, then immediately began planning how to use the new prince as a bargaining chip with warring factions. What makes Catherine's story unique is how she transformed the traditional weakness of royal pregnancy into political strength. She established a network of female spies who reported on the fertility and pregnancy status of rival noble families, essentially turning reproduction into espionage. Her 10th and final pregnancy at age 37 nearly killed her. The labor lasted 4 days, and contemporary accounts describe her bleeding so heavily that priests administered last rites. But she survived, and the daughter born from that traumatic delivery would become Queen Margot, one of the most influential women of the Renaissance. Catherine lived to see 3 of her sons become kings of France, proving that strategic motherhood could indeed reshape dynasties. Our next queen takes us to medieval Castile, where a Spanish princess would literally birth an empire. Blanche of Castile was born around 1188 and married to the future King Louis VIII of France in 1200. What followed was one of the most politically significant reproductive careers in European history. She delivered 12 children who would establish French dominance across medieval Europe. Blanche's approach to royal motherhood was revolutionary for its time. Instead of simply producing heirs and handing them to wet nurses, she personally supervised their education and political training. She understood that in medieval politics, the quality of your children mattered as much as quantity. Her most challenging pregnancy came during the Siege of La Rochelle in 1224. While French forces battled English defenders, Blanche went into labor in a castle under constant bombardment. She delivered her 9th child, Prince Robert, to the sound of catapults hurling stones against the castle walls. What made Blanche extraordinary was her recovery time between pregnancies. While most royal women needed months to recuperate, Blanche was often back in the saddle, literally, within weeks of giving birth, riding beside her husband on military campaigns while pregnant with the next child. Contemporary chroniclers describe her as having an almost supernatural ability to compartmentalize the physical trauma of childbirth. She would deliver a baby in the morning and be conducting diplomatic negotiations that same evening, as if nothing had happened. Her most famous son was Louis IX, who would become Saint Louis, one of the greatest kings in French history. But all of her children were strategically placed in positions of power across Europe through carefully arranged marriages. Blanche died at 64, having outlived most of her children, but having successfully established a French royal dynasty that would dominate European politics for centuries. From medieval France, we travel to 15th century Portugal, where a queen would literally populate European royalty. Isabella of Portugal married King John II of Castile in 1447 and began what would become one of the most influential reproductive careers in Iberian history. Over 18 years, she delivered 13 children who would sit on thrones from England to Naples. What made Isabella's situation unique was the complex web of Iberian politics during the Reconquista. Every pregnancy carried the potential to shift the balance of power between Christian and Muslim forces, making her womb a literal battlefield for the future of Spain. Her 5th pregnancy occurred during the Siege of Granada, the last Muslim stronghold in Spain. While Christian armies prepared for the final assault, Isabella delivered Prince Alfonso in a military camp, then immediately began planning how the new prince could be used to secure alliances with Italian city-states. Isabella pioneered what historians call strategic fertility, deliberately timing pregnancies to coincide with political opportunities. When negotiations with England required a royal hostage, she conveniently became pregnant, knowing the child could serve diplomatic purposes. Her most dangerous delivery came during her 12th pregnancy at age 39. She had developed what court physicians called bleeding sickness, likely severe anemia from repeated childbearing. The labor lasted 6 days, and she nearly died multiple times. Yet she recovered enough for one final pregnancy that produced Princess Catherine, who would become Catherine of Aragon and briefly Queen of England as Henry VIII's first wife.
Isabella's legacy lived on through her children's marriages. Her offspring became queens of England, Naples, and Portugal, kings of Spain and Sicily, creating a genetic network that dominated European politics for generations. Now we venture into the Habsburg heartland, where an Austrian archduchess would redefine imperial motherhood. Anna of Austria was born in 1549 and married King Philip II of Spain in 1570, beginning what would become one of the most politically crucial reproductive careers of the Habsburg era. Over 15 years, she delivered 11 children while serving as regent for the Spanish Empire. What made Anna exceptional was her ability to combine constant pregnancy with active rule. While Philip II was often away managing his vast territories, Anna governed Spain, Portugal, and the Spanish Netherlands while pregnant more often than not. Her most remarkable achievement came during her 7th pregnancy when she successfully negotiated the annexation of Portugal while 8 months pregnant. Diplomatic records describe her conducting crucial meetings while experiencing labor pains, literally birthing an empire. Anna established mobile birthing chambers that could be quickly assembled in any palace or castle, allowing her to maintain political activity right up until labor began. She often gave birth in the morning and held court audiences that same evening. Her 9th pregnancy coincided with the Spanish Armada preparations. While Philip II planned to invade England, Anna managed the domestic logistics of the massive military operation while carrying their son. She delivered Prince Philip during the week the Armada sailed, then immediately resumed coordinating supply lines for the invasion. Contemporary accounts described Anna as having developed an almost mechanical approach to childbirth. She treated each pregnancy as a political project to be managed rather than a medical condition to be endured. She died at age 31 during her 11th labor, but her children would continue Habsburg dominance across Europe. Her son would become Philip III of Spain, and her daughters married into virtually every major European royal family. Our final queen brings us to medieval Poland, where a Hungarian princess would establish one of Europe's most successful dynasties. Elizabeth of Bosnia married King Louis I of Hungary and Poland in 1353 and delivered 14 children over 22 years, establishing the Angevin hold on Eastern European politics. What made her story remarkable was how she used constant pregnancy as a diplomatic strategy. Elizabeth understood that in medieval politics, a pregnant queen was temporarily untouchable. Enemies hesitated to attack kingdoms whose queens might die in childbirth and create succession crises. She deliberately maintained almost constant pregnancy as a form of political insurance.
Her most strategic pregnancy occurred during a Turkish invasion in 1366. While Ottoman forces approached the Hungarian border, Elizabeth announced her 8th pregnancy, effectively forcing potential rebels to delay any uprising until after the royal birth. She pioneered the concept of pregnancy diplomacy, using her condition to extract concessions from foreign ambassadors who feared being blamed if negotiations stressed her into miscarriage. Venetian diplomatic records describe her conducting trade negotiations while in active labor, knowing the urgency would favor Hungarian terms. Elizabeth's children were strategically deployed across Europe through marriages that created a web of Polish-Hungarian influence stretching from the Baltic to the Adriatic. Her daughter became Queen of Naples, her sons ruled various duchies, and her genetic legacy dominated Eastern European politics for centuries. She died at 47 during her 14th childbirth, but her reproductive strategy had successfully established Hungarian-Polish dominance in a region constantly threatened by Ottoman expansion. These 7 queens, Margarita Teresa of Spain, Philippa of Hainault, Catherine de Medici, Blanche of Castile, Isabella of Portugal, Anna of Austria, and Elizabeth of Bosnia, represent the ultimate evolution of royal motherhood as political strategy. They weren't just baby-making machines, they were reproductive warriors who understood that in medieval and early modern politics, fertility was power. Each pregnancy was a calculated risk, each birth a victory against impossible odds, each surviving child a chess piece in the complex game of European politics. They transformed their wombs into weapons of dynasty building, their bodies into instruments of empire. These women endured physical agony that would hospitalize modern mothers, recovered from trauma that would require months of medical care today, and did it all while managing kingdoms, negotiating treaties, and planning the futures of continents. Their stories remind us that behind every great European dynasty, every shifting balance of continental power, every marriage alliance that prevented or started wars, there was a woman who had literally sacrificed her body, her health, and often her life to make that greatness possible. They lived in an era when maternal mortality was staggering, when infection could kill within days of childbirth, when the miracle of birth was always shadowed by the possibility of death. Yet they chose to risk everything, again and again, because they understood that their fertility could reshape the world.